Roughly 30 years ago is whenever Suffocation first started to burst on the scene with their earliest demos and EPs. And here we are in 2017 still talking about them as an important member of the death metal equation. Of course, their debut album back in 1990, Effigy of the Forgotten, is really one of the albums that first introduced perhaps the concept that we now know and know very well as technical death metal. And here with their brand new album in 2017, Of the Dark Light, this is not something that has changed from their sound. In fact, if anything, throughout the years, the intricacies has only pushed the bar higher to now where Suffocation doesn't have to do that any longer. They no longer have to be that sort of genre-defying, bar-pushing band any longer. Instead, they can just continue to maintain their craft and sit really within their throne as one of the more important members of the death metal universe. So with this album, this 9-track affair that comes in at about 35 minutes, this is not really all of that uncommon. This is very par for the course whenever it comes to what Suffocation has yielded throughout their career. And honestly, whenever you talk about a band that is about 30 years strong, you start to wonder where the envelope can be pushed any longer, and they don't aim to do that with this album as stated previously. Instead, this is an album that feels very much like the band is continuing on their journey through technical death metal and really giving it that old school charm and veneer of the early 1990s, something that they've always been able to sort of maintain throughout their career. But I feel like this is an album that, despite the cover seeming like they're going a little bit over the top, is one that instead stays very comfortable within the things and the ideas that made them a death metal mainstay. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's take a look, first of all, with the very first 2 cuts off of this album. Clarity Through Deprivation and the Warmth Within the Dark. These are 2 songs that really, whenever you listen to them for the first time, they almost feel like one gigantic 7-minute and 45-second long piece. You don't get much of a break between these 2 tracks, and the makeup of these are so similar that the transition is very smooth, it's very flawless. And not to mention, it's something where they're able to balance and offset the hyper or like the more aggressive latent points with those that are a little bit more focused on sort of slowing things down, building a ton of atmosphere, and trying to showcase sort of the depths of a crypt. And that's the best way that I can put it. You know, some folks say that these guys are also sort of the forefathers of the slam riff, but at the same time, some of these you can see used as, you know, breakdowns for newer bands. But whenever a band such as Suffocation does it, it has such of that, you know, so much of that old school charm to it that you just feel like you're descending further and further down through perhaps a large cave or cavern that is only going to find some sort of depravity, some sort of horror, a crypt that is filled with the souls of the slain by an insane or, you know, absolutely mad individual. And the music is able to reflect this nicely as well. Suffocation has never been a band that's needed to go too far. They have been able to control their technicality, and this is the balance that I think a lot of technical death metal bands of today sometimes really forget. There is certainly something to be said about Suffocation's ability to blend both harmony as well as rhythm with their technical prowess, and that's what's showcased very beautifully throughout these first 2 cuts. Moving forward into the album, we start to get into a lot of very similar territory. In fact, with 2 tracks clocking in at the 3-minute and 41-second mark, that being the title track, as well as the Violation. But whenever we get to track 3, which is Your Last Breaths, this is the mammoth song on the album, I guess, at 4.5 minutes. This is not that long. I mean, this is an album with 9 cuts at 35 minutes. But it has that sort of big song feel to it despite its shortened length. This is a song that feels very much right at home with Suffocation's classic discography from the early 1990s. It has that nice burst of controlled mayhem that is able to really label it not only as a true Suffocation track, but also put it right there among the heavyweights of the tech death world. And it's also one that, again, based off its lack of overindulgence, feels very smooth, and it has that ultra slick feel to it that some better production has been able to grant, while still having a lot of dirt and grime to it. You still feel like you are going someplace that is not very nice. You still have that feeling that you're going to a place that is not where you want to be. You're about to discover something absolutely horrific. And they're able to maintain this. This is just fantastic guitar work that's blended with a nice little mix of percussion that sort of delivers the overall flavor. And whenever these lyrics are spoken, they are not so garbled down that they can't be understood. Instead, it's done in a way that makes you feel very much like you are suffering through this ordeal with a deranged madman as your guide. Now, the album itself is not going to feel like anything all of that atypical from Suffocation's career. The real difference maker, however, are cuts such as Your Last Breaths that feel like they could easily swing with the heavyweights of this band's discography. And based around that, it does color the album with a nicer, sort of finish, a nicer varnish. It gives it a little bit more luster, whereas previous albums may have felt like they were a little bit weak, or the color was starting to fade a little bit from the Suffocation wall. It's very interesting how some, minor decision changes really caused such a huge difference in this style of music, considering we all know of the prowess, we all know of the technical mastery. It's really presentation that becomes the keynote factor as to what determines a good album and one that feels very run-of-the-mill and really sort of treading the line of average. And whenever you finally get to the very final cuts off of this disc, you still feel like you've listened to something that's pretty damn good. Not necessarily Effigy of the Forgotten transcendent good, but instead an album that you would actually want to return to. One that has enough good ideas to keep you coming back, and a great reminder as to why Suffocation is still considered to be one of the more important, still together, death metal bands from the early days in existence currently. This is an album that's a 21 out of 30. Like I said, it doesn't blow you away. This is not a disc that's going to, melt your mind or anything like that, especially as a Suffocation fan. You've heard mind melting before. This is not quite there, but it's still a great listen. It's still one that you are encouraged by the material to return to, and it's one that you will want to return to. And any purveyor of the old school charm of death metal will like this, considering it has that elder sort of touch to it, as opposed to feeling like it is too swarmed down by other adjectives and too swarmed down by some of the current parlor tricks in production that make it sound a little bit, I guess, passé. I want to know what you guys think about Of the Dark Light by Suffocation. Let me know in the comments below. My name is coverkillernation, and also let me know what your favorite Suffocation album is. I'll see you later.